We're back after dark, and I, Kevin Couchman, am the judge of all of all you Patreon subscribers, and I judge you awesome for supporting the pod. I really appreciate it.
Good job, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Mwah. We appreciate it. Aaron is back. We are still talking Blood Meridian. Not a Cormac episode. That won't be until next year, but hopefully you found the discussion to be interesting and edifying. And if you've not yet read the novel, I would encourage you to do so. I don't think anything we've said would spoil I don't think it's possible to spoil this novel.
Not really.
So, yeah.
There's not a twist.
No.
Well,
maybe there is.
The outhouse is the closest thing, and we didn't even touch on that, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that, Aaron. I've learned some stuff, and it makes me want to reread it. And just like, any enthralling conversation about a great book or a great writer, it really has got me inspired to get back to the writing desk. Honestly, like one of those things that rejuvenates me in terms of like, gosh, if you can scratch out something that is anywhere even close to what McCarthy accomplished, then holy shit, man, maybe all of this is, maybe I'm worth a damn. Well, so things that we wanted to talk about. I mean, Kevin, where do you want to start with the tarot stuff, or do you want to start with the?
Yeah, let's start with the tarot stuff. So there's a scene that kind of happens in the first third of the novel, and there is a motif running through this of kind of like clowning and circus performers and jugglers, and that's a kind of a motif running through this novel. How folks used to entertain themselves and others before podcasters came along and took the spotlight, and that did include fortune telling and kind of this, one thinks of maybe like the Elephant Man, how the Elephant Man came out of the freak show and that sort of old timey period, and you'd have a fortune teller and she would pull your card. And a lot of this all happens in Espanol as well.
Yes.
So you're not getting much help there if you don't have Spanish either. So
yeah.
How many cards does he pull? He pulls 3?
Yeah. They pull 3 cards. There's a fourth that is sort of referenced that you might think of as the fourth card, but it's not specifically part of the reading. And the 3 cards that are pulled are so just generally, Glanton Gang has agreed to chaperone this group of it's a traveling show, and I think one of them might be a juggler of some kind, but in part of this there is a fortune teller. The judge seems to already know that there is a fortune teller in the crowd, and he invites her to read their cards. They pull a card for 3 members, including the kid, but generally it's a 3-card reading. It can be read as a 3-card reading for the whole gang, and the judge implies that, in fact, this is a reading for the whole gang. A 3-card reading, you can do a 3-card reading a bunch of different ways. It can be a past, present, and future reading. It can be a beginning, middle, and end reading, which is, in a lot of ways, is sort of the same. It can be a problem. It can be an obstacle solution resolution reading. It can be, there's probably a few others. I think you can probably read this as something like a past, present, and future reading is probably how I would take this, just because of how the specific symbology of the cards relates to what goes on. And the cards that are pulled are the Fool, the 4 of Cups, and the Chariot. For people who don't know anything about the tarot, the Fool and the the Chariot are in what is called the Major Arcana. Tarot deck is made up of 78 cards. There are 4 suits. There are that go ace through 10, and a court, which varies slightly from deck to deck, but you can basically imagine as the page, knight, king, and queen. And then on top of that, there are 22 cards that make up the Major Arcana. with the Fool at 0, and then the Magician at number 1, going all the way to number 21, the World. Very, very similar arrangement in some ways to a traditional poker deck. Now, the Fool card is it's a very, very interesting card. It's the 0. It starts the whole thing out. The major arcana is also called the Fool's Journey. A fool, there's so many things you could say about it. I mean, you can relate it to the trickster figure that the judge is supposed to be, but you can also relate it to how it's commonly interpreted is the foolish courage that is required to enter into and survive any endeavor, right? So if you are preoccupied with the dangers of an endeavor, you are likely, and again, not cautious about them, but preoccupied with them, you are unlikely to survive it. You can't stay in that state of constantly focused on the danger of whatever adventure you're on. And it calls to mind that phrase that Cormac uses in here, something, notions of fate and chance are the preoccupation of men engaged in Aaron probably knows it off the top of his head. Notions of chance and fate are the preoccupation of men engaged in something. It kind of resonates with that. So it applies to the whole group. I mean, this is a foolish endeavor in some ways what the Glanton gang is up to, right? They've gone, and if you look at a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which has become the most commonly referenced deck, and there's a good argument that, in fact, the deck in Blood Meridian is some version of a Rider-Waite tarot deck. More on that in a second. The Fool is looking up into the sky and walking off a cliff, right? Just going to step off of a cliff. I don't think that's actually quite as interesting as the 4 of Cups card in this. And Aaron, I know on the Blood Meridian Substack, you have a piece on the tarot. And so some of this is going to overlap. I don't think there's anything where we're really bumping heads or anything, but yeah. So if you've got something else, throw it in there for sure. The 4 of Cups were eventually transliterated into the heart suit in the cards. Commonly are thought of to be the water sign. They're commonly thought to refer to the unconscious and emotions. The 4 in particular is a microcosm of the Hermit card. A Rider-Waite deck will depict a figure sitting under a tree with 3 empty cups sort of withdrawn, and a 4th cup is being handed out of the ether to that figure. It's a card about withdrawal. It's a card about uncertainty. It's a card about finding oneself in the space of not being quite fulfilled, of wanting to step out of society. We see the kid doing that, right? He runs away, and it's like he never stops running away, ever, really, right? I mean, he's constantly, as soon as he finds himself within a system, he finds his way out of it in a lot of ways. But the 4 is very interesting for other reasons. In Robert Wang's The Kabbalistic Tarot, which is a highly influential book on the tarot.
That's a banger. If you want to learn the tarot seriously.
It's a good one. Now, there's a lot of shit in there that's going to go over your head if you don't know Kabbalah, but it is good. I have it somewhere nearby.
If you don't know Kabbalah, what are you doing being a professor of Kabbalah? You know, in an alternate universe, there's a woman named Kabbalah Harris who's the vice president. Can you imagine? I don't know where any of this is coming from, but yes, Robert Wang's, that book is if you want to learn tarot, get that book.
Yeah, Robert Wang is one of the, I'm not sure if he's still alive, actually, but he's one of the handful of like most significant contributors to the tarot tradition, like in our lifetimes. He also wrote the 2 books on the Jungian tarot, relating Jungian ideas to the tarot, and it's amazing. But 4 of Cups often refers to a step on the tarot, the Sephiroth of Chesed, or mercy. And as we know, the concept of mercy is sort of entangled with the kid. I mean, in some ways, the fact that he is merciful is the thing that sets him aside. That's what's wrong in that phrase that Judge uses, something wrong with in the fabric of him, right? He's constantly he's one of the only characters that shows any kind of mercy whatsoever to anybody within the Glanton gang. And there's also something I thought about a lot rereading. I'd be curious what your guys' take on this is when the Glanton gang's violence really ramps up, when they're ransacking a village, say, the kid is strangely absent. Now, it's implied by the action that he is part of the gang. I mean, he's there before it and he's there after it, so he's somehow participating. But there is this, and Aaron, tell me if I'm wrong, it does seem like there's this, he's kind of gone for a while. And you don't hear about the kids specifically. I don't even think you hear about him specifically scalping anybody.
No, you never see him take part in the violence of the gang.
Yeah.
Whether he does or not, I don't know, but the judge indicts him for precisely this. You alone were mutinous.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
You alone reserves some corner of clemency, mercy in your heart for the heathen, right?
Yeah.
Well, so he's a counterfeit marauder. The kid.
Yeah. He's a counterfeit filibuster.
In this photo negative reality, he lacks faith. Somehow, right? He lacks faith in whatever the judge's religion is, right? And now here's something that's very interesting. In the final chapter, and we can spoil because we're on Patreon. In the final chapter, the kid, the man now, re-encounters the judge in a bar in Fort Griffin. In my opinion, one of the great scenes in all of literature. I mean, there's very little out there that is going to beat this thing, in my opinion. And there is a moment now, the Four of Cups, remember the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, there are 3 cups on the ground, and the hermit, the kid, let's call him, is being handed a 4th cup from the ether, from a little cloud. In the Fort Griffin bar room, the kid drinks 3 drinks, and the 4th offered to him by the judge, he refuses. It's the final fulfillment, and here's what's going on partially with the four of cups as a tarot reader. Somebody, I can tell you kind of what this card means to me when I pull it up. There is a sense that we all get to at some point where we become dissatisfied with what the world has offered us from an emotional standpoint. You can get to that nihilistic sort of mindset where you say, I don't give a shit about any of this, right? Like you can't fill this hole I've got in me with anything that you've got, whether it's any pleasures, none of it's actually going to work for me. And the tragedy comes when you reject even the last one that's being offered to you, right? There's always the world's always willing to offer you another one. And if you will not accept anything, then you're sort of lost. And I think this is something that's going on with the kid. Now, of course, he probably shouldn't accept the judge's last cup. But the fact that McCarthy reinstantiates this pattern of three empty cups and a 4th rejected cup indicates that McCarthy is using tarot in a very deep way to organize how the book itself is structured. And there are other instances of this. This is the most significant. When we talk about the Chariot, and I could talk about the Chariot for a long time, the Chariot card in the reading back with this traveling troubadours is blown out by the wind. It's withdrawn and it's sort of sucked out into it's like a black hole has pulled it and it disappears. In tarot, we would read that as a reversal. It's the opposite. It's the meaning that you would normally attribute to it is flipped upside down. And what this would indicate is that there's going to be some kind of harsh fate associated, if you're in typical divination practice, some kind of harsh fate's going to be associated with the Chariot. Where does it all really go wrong with the Glanton gang? At the ferry. And what is the ferry? The ferry is, I believe it's literally a wagon without wheels that has been converted into a boat. It's a chariot.
Upside down.
Turned upside down.
The cart inverted, yes. as the woman says.
Yes.
Or wheelless on a dark river.
Exactly. So this has all been scripted. Like, McCarthy is telling you where all of this is going to go in these 3 cards. This is a fool's errand. The kid will never find what he's looking for, and will even reject, based on his merciful nature, will reject what's offered to him in the final, sort of the final moment. And his fate will be, his and the gang's fate will be sealed in the chariot. Now, there's all kinds of other meanings to the chariot. It's tied into old, like, Merkaba mysticism and the visions of Ezekiel. Like, of course, all of these cards go deep and can go infinite. I mean, we could talk about the chariot for probably another hour, but the fact that this stuff is all threaded through. Now, there's one other thing about that I find fascinating about how McCarthy's using these cards. Based on the description that he gives of the High Priestess card, which isn't come in the actual reading, but is referred to, this is most likely a Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, which did not exist in the 1850s. This is an anachronistic deck. McCarthy has chosen this, and he's which I don't know if this tells us anything about some of the questions we raised in the main episode, who the narrator is, who the judge is. But I find that fascinating for a man who is so incredibly scrupulous about all the historical details. That was on purpose, right? That wasn't I screwed up. I was just looking on Wikipedia and I saw a tarot deck. This is highly intentional. I'm not 100% sure what to make of it, but yeah. Anyway, that's I'm
not gonna lay that to like, whoops, he didn't know that. It's possible that that deck emerge from that deck must have emerged from previous decks.
Yeah, but there was never a figure on the 4 of Cups. There wasn't a figure on the 4 of Cups until the 1890s in the Solobusca deck.
Fascinating. What this reminds me of is that passage in the novel where they come across the ruins of the like the adobe builders, and he says in the novel something to the effect of, and this will happen again. And that's very pointedly talking about our own civilization.
What is that? There's a bit he talks about anybody who the fact that they were building in stone meant they intended to give shape to the universe, and somehow by doing that you are thereby inviting destruction and ruin on yourself or something.
I would like to think that he put that bit about the tarot in there just for you, Brad Kelly.
He did, obviously.
It alters the shape of the universe, right? Because the other natives that they've been sparring with, particularly the Comanche and Apache, did not build in stone, did not build permanent structures, right? And McCarthy has this theory of stone that comes out in the stonemason, where he believes that there is something almost mystical about the desire of man to build in stone. You see this in the last chapter of No Country for Old Men, where Sheriff Bell says, where you came out the side of the house, there was a stone trough beside the house. And he says, this is what I want, to build in stone, to build something like that trough. So there's something deeply important to McCarthy about building in stone.
Now, Aaron, you probably know this. Apparently at one point, Cormac built a house, and part of how he built it was he used stones that were part of James Agee's house.
Correct.
So this is not like, this actually means something to him beyond a literary artifice. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Masonic.
100%. And the thing is, yes,
there's
it is
a lot
Masonic.
of that in his work, of course.
Yeah.
Which is highly Gnostic. Freemason's Kabbalistic and Gnostic.
Anybody who's playing at that level of symbolism. I mean, I have my private theory that all novelists are sort of Gnostics in a way, but we don't have to get there. But here's the thing: there are all kinds of traditions about there being spirit in the stone. I mean, if you look at the Mithraic cults of Greece and Rome and Europe, they believed that their god had literally emerged from the stone. There are native tribes that had sort of small gods that they referred to as rock babies. that that would be the translation into English, obviously, that were sort of childlike spirits that lived within the rock, that their job was to sort of nurture and cultivate the development of. Like, McCarthy is participating in a cross-cultural tradition that isn't always carefully articulated, but is clearly there, which I find amazing. This also reminds me of, one other thing. There's a point where they're in a dry riverbed and they're very concerned that it's going to rain. And they're looking at the stones, and the stones in the riverbed have been smoothed because they're river stones. And there's just this notion of, like, at any point, this could be filled with water. Like, any moment. I love that. Anyway, I'm getting all... Well,
that actually happens to Blevins and All the Pretty Horses. That's how he gets unhorsed.
That's right. You're right.
Right?
There
and
is.
John Grady warns him. Like, he comes down and Blevins is seeking shelter, and he's like, do you have any idea what you're doing?
Yeah.
Could be a storm come down through here, gully washer, and wash you clean they wouldn't find even,
Yeah. You're totally right. Yeah. Well, that's such a scary and very real danger in that part of the world, especially. Yeah. Huh. Well, that's kind of all I got on tarot stuff. I mean, there is some other stuff about it for sure. I think, for me, it's exciting to see an author of this magnitude take it seriously as a because literally, like, I throw tarot when I'm trying to figure out plot in my stuff I'm working on. So it's very gratifying for me to dig into that and see that he's using this stuff because it's so potent narratively.
Before we go on from that, can we look at the way Black Jackson, as he's called in the novel, is killed? So he walks out onto that cart.
Yeah.
The cart of war, that everything the tarot reader tells him comes true, or tells the gang comes true. Right. Every single thing, right? Wheel us on a dark river, and et cetera, et cetera. So Jackson walks out. He stood and wiped the grit from the piece and held it up, and as he did so, a long cane arrow passed through his upper abdomen and flew on and fell far out in the river and sank and back to the surface again and began to turn and shift downstream. He faced around, his robe sustained about him. He was holding the wound with his other hand, and he ravaged among his clothes for the weapons that were not there and were not there. A second arrow passed him on the left, and two more struck and lodged in his chest and in his groin. So he now is festooned, right? Just like the tarot card.
Yeah.
By the wand, right?
Right. Amazing.
They were a full 4 feet in length, and they lofted slightly with his movements, etc., like ceremonial wands.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't even know what to say about that. That's amazing. Well, and this is stuff that you could easily read over. You don't even need to know this to really appreciate like what's to read this book and get a lot out of it. But it is interesting that you scratch any spot and there's another layer. Oh, and then there's another layer, and then there's another layer, and he's referring to literature, and he's referring to the Bible, and it's Gnosticism, and it's tarot, and it's actual literal technology, like the technological history of the United States. Like there's always another layer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's an indictment of the America that he saw as well. It's just I'm sure you could just read. What year did this come out, Aaron? 85. I mean, so we're coming off of the 70s. We've got Reagan is happening. He saw Vietnam. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he was in Vietnam, was he? No. So when we don't want to get into bio too much, but yeah, again, it's a novel about America now, and I think America, like forever, as long as it exists in this form. I mean, I think you could say the child is the child itself is like this American thing, which is violent and bloody, but also has a compassionate side, but it's never enough to overcome I guess the archonic force of this character of the judge, who is appealing.
Yeah,
the judge is
sure. The best villains
charismatic. He's so fun. I'd love to get shit faced drunk and have a whore on my arm and dance while the judge fiddled. Maybe I've done that a few times in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But it is one of those, and I've been in this situation. It is one of those things where like the night starts out kind of fun and interesting, and this guy's kind of, and then like by 2-3 in the morning, it's like, holy fucking shit. Like, are we going to jail? Like, how is this going to go? How does this end, man? Because because he just brought out another thing. And he seems to know another, like,
what did he just say?
We're going to a fourth location. And, it's a town I live in, but I've never heard of it. Like,
oh hell yeah.
The Mennonite warns the kid and his buddies before the Comanche attack on White's Column in San Antonio about precisely this. You know, do you take war of a madman's making onto a foreign land? You'll wait more than the dogs, right? You know, and there's like, oh, you think he's going to stop us at the river? Pray that he does, right?
Right.
And of course, things are done that can't be undone.
Right.
And the Mennonite says, no joy in the tavern as upon the road thereto.
That's a great line. That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Well, oh man, on that, can we transition to one of the questions I teed up in the free episode? And I want to know Aaron's opinion, and I want to know your opinion too, Kevin. But if Blood Meridian landed on, let's say, an agent's desk right now, and of course it had never existed before, how do you think that would go? Do you think what do you think it would happen?
Okay, are we imagining that this is by a first-time author, like that this is a debut?
Yeah.
I don't think it makes it out of the slush pile.
Right. Well, and I don't want you to like disparage anything necessarily, but like, why do you think that is?
Well, because I think that the readers who would read it quickly and not as thoughtfully as they might, right, would see it as problematic, which is my favorite word, and they would read instead of reading into it the critique of racism that's clearly there, they would just read it as racist.
Right. A lot of folks have seemed to have lost the capacity to deal with that twist, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That say a comedian might be saying something racist, quotes, because what they're poking fun at is the fact that somebody would say that sort of thing, right? These layered and self-reflexive kind of moments. We've seemed to
the whole thing that art would lampoon folly and vice, right? That would be
that writ large. It's an indictment.
That's right.
He's indicting us now today by showing us them then and pointing out how much of this carries through to the present. Even if it is a forgery of history, he's showing you something about today.
That's right.
And tomorrow. And ergo the tarot.
Yeah. Well, and there's something, and I have to be careful how I say this because I want to make sure I'm making the point I want to make and not some other point. There is something anti-progressive about this book, and I don't mean in the narrow contemporary political sense.
It does have a serious reaction. If you wanted to do a reactionary reading of this, you could.
I mean in like the heart of darkness sense. Like, right, like we all have convinced ourselves that just more and more and more of what humans do is somehow good, and yet hold on a second, this is what human beings are actually like, right?
Yeah. And there's also the thing of, and what I take exception with, whether it comes from the right, the left, you are not going to make human beings better by any means. You're not going to make them better. You can introduce them to Jesus. You can introduce them to antidepressants. You can make sure they have good jobs. But human nature is not going to be changed. It just isn't.
Right.
It isn't. And so this idea of progress as a teleology of, oh, here man is, and look at all the progress we've made. Oh, tell me about the progress of the atomic bomb. Tell me about the progress of the Holocaust and 6 million murdered Jews. Tell me about the progress of the Stalinist purges, 20 to 50 million. Tell me about the progress of Mao's genocide, 50 to 100 million. Tell me about
the progress of Yum Yum, Ice Cream Yum, Gang Gang.
Yes. Clearly, we're enriched. Yum Yum, we're enriched. We have attained the zenith. Way better than Shakespeare.
I'm trying to find this quote that Cormac McCarthy gave in an interview in the 80s. Is well made. That hits that exactly.
Find that. That point is well made, Aaron. And people, they need like you say, teleology. That is a feature of all good religions. And the progressive religion, we're gonna think our way into a utopia where at least we'll mitigate. Call it human nature, call it original sin, whatever vernacular you choose to use. And the transhumanists are the next iteration of this sort of idea that we're going to be post-human. I've been noting, and again, we're not a political podcast, but we do get political once in a while. I have been noting that it's sort of like you look around the landscape of discourse, such as it is. I can't find a single fucking humanist. I used to, as like a cradle Catholic, the one true faith. I didn't drop it on the main episode, but I'm doing it now for Aaron.
We're gonna have a hard time in the Milton episode.
I just want to make sure. I just want to do that for Aaron's benefit. So this is outreach. I'm evangelizing. I mean, listen, the Glanton gang. Those are all Protestants, Aaron. I hope you were aware.
They are.
But what about even the ex? Well, we don't have to get into it. I'm just teasing a bit. But
can I give this quote before?
Just let me finish this one thought. Like in the discourse. Being raised Catholic, cradle Catholic, practicing Catholic now, like as much as one can be, I do my best. It's like, but also educated by the state and like state schools and a degree in philosophy and all these other things. Like humanism was the thing that I was like, okay, well, that's our olive branch. Like I can see how that emerged out of Christianity and the church.
Right.
Maybe we don't want to go so far into like pure materialism, but I can understand that you could be like a materialist humanist.
Right. And you can there's a way you can make an argument. Well, like, okay, well, we don't have faith, but we're humanists. That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't hear that word anymore. I don't see them. And I'm like kind of thinking, were they a phantom? Did they exist? Was it all just a lie until they could finally just take over the apparatus of power and reveal themselves to be the insane social engineers that they really are? I'm just going to I don't know what more to say about that, but like for the love of God, bring the humanists back.
Give me a humanist.
Give me a humanist. Yeah.
In the early modern period, the humanista comes out of this sense that the pursuit of these arts and disciplines are what makes one human.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I'm sure I don't know how that's offensive today. I just know that that's probably offensive.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, just slightly political, and I won't even name the people that are involved, but there's a very controversial political figure on the scene right now who in an interview the other day that I was listening to said, I think the highest aim of a democracy is the arts. It's like, oh, he's a conspiracy. Well, they're not throwing him under the bus for that, but he's like literally the only political figure in my lifetime who would have dared to utter such a thing. Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. That's a very interesting. Yeah.
And you could argue whether that's true or not, but like the fact that anybody was saying anything like instead, there's always for the arts, the political in my lifetime, the political sphere has always treated arts as like a token. It's sort of a like, well, yes, of course we're into the arts, but like none of them have any literacy or any actual concern about any of it other than like the occasional throwaway thing where they kind of stand and nod while somebody reads a shitty poem, you know.
The closest in our lifetime, probably, to be fair, to try to be fair. I mean, President Obama is a reader and tried to promote books.
That's true.
And did promote, and a lot of the books he promoted are like real ass books.
That's true. You're right about that.
So in terms of like, saying that we're going to make art, a pillar or something like, I haven't heard that. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me read this quote I found from the Cormac McCarthy. There was a Cormac McCarthy interview in the 1992, called The Venomous Fiction of Cormac McCarthy. As people probably know who've listened this far, he didn't do a whole lot of interviews. I mean, I think you can count them maybe on two hands, the number of interviews that he did that are published. But here's something that he said, quote, "There's no such thing as a life without bloodshed. I think the notion that the species can be improved in some way, that everyone could live in harmony, is a really dangerous idea. And here's the kicker. Those who are afflicted with this notion are the first ones to give up their souls, their freedom. Your desire that it be that way will enslave you and make your life vacuous." And to me, that encapsulates a lot. It's not a fetishization of violence and bloodshed. It's an understanding that like this shit is like you don't get everything or nothing's going to be orderly unless you cut off the pieces that don't fit. That's the only way you make this whole thing orderly. It's the only way you get everybody on the spreadsheet.
This follows on what Aaron was saying in the main episode that we did today about his Catholicism and then how that's inescapable. People will laugh at Christians who don't understand, like, why would you have a cross on your neck? That's the last thing Jesus would want to see. It's like, well, tell me more about how you misunderstand this religion and this faith and what it is. Because it is exactly the answer to the thing that you just read from him.
Yeah.
Why we do focus on the blood.
Right. You eat the body and drink the blood, right? I mean,
well, and also you focus on the suffering on the cross because there's a universal message in it.
One of the things I was raised Pentecostal. One of the things I appreciated about I don't know much about Catholicism. I just see it and have a lot of friends who are Catholics. But the fact that Catholics from very early on realized the importance of ritual to human beings, and that it's not just pomp and circumstance. The ritual is a springboard to the divine, and that people need physical manifestations and items of faith. That, relics are important. A crucifix or the rosary is important, and that the physical is something that the human can attach to in the pursuit of a spiritual aim. That's so smart. I don't even know if I should have given that away. I should probably charge you guys for that.
No, you're right though. And this is something that does get lost in the secularization of things. We tend to cast aside rituals, and then we find that we sort of reinvent them, and they're half-assed in a lot of ways. There's interesting, the writer Mircea Eliade said that archaic man didn't do everything that the archaic man did. He understood as a repetition of something that had been done forever. That was how they lived. That was how you lived
the fire.
Your life.
That's the fire.
That's great. That's really great. I love that, Brad.
It's so good.
It's very good. Who said that?
Mircea Eliade.
Wow. We have to cover him at some point.
Might even have
That's fire.
Yeah, I've got that book right over here too. Sheesh.
So it's such good stuff. And that's what and that's partially when you understand that you are losing ritual and losing religion, you can get into these intellectual debates about, well, the facts of the matter, what they actually are. But the truth is you start giving up what were the things that actually bound you to life. Right? Like, you can you give up all of that stuff and eventually you're left with nothing, and it's, oh, my life is meaningless. Like, yeah, maybe because you don't do any of the things that mattered to anybody ever.
Right. You're literally denying your own nature, your own human nature. And I've got my Holy Bible right here, and I've got my copy of Blood Meridian.
That seems a little blasphemous, but all right, I'll allow it.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's just, you could read Blood Meridian as like a cry of the heart, as a kind of moment of like doubt in faith. If you wanted to read it that way, and I don't pretend to read Cormac McCarthy's mind, but as a reader, you can kind of go like, damn, is this motherfucker trying to like test my belief? Like, is the judge more powerful than God?
Yeah.
Articles I've written on Blood Meridian and posted, and threads on Blood Meridian I posted on Twitter, I have inevitably had several Jesuit priests or on Twitter comment and say, "Oh, I love Blood Meridian so much. What a terrifying and beautiful work of art, and what mastery." It's interesting that these happen to always be Jesuits, but I don't think that a Jesuit priest would have any. I don't speak for Jesuit priests, but would have any trouble seeing what you just said, Kevin, as being, oh, of course.
Yeah, and that has merit. I mean, that's what we renew that constantly. There's no Christian alive today who's sensible, who doesn't. It's not just that you come through and pass the doubt. It's that you live in the doubt, which is faith. That's what faith is.
Yeah,
it's active. It's a verb. Just like judge is a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because I think you can now also frame the Gnosticism aspects of this thing as themselves a test. There is a certain, when you hear about Manichaean Gnosticism as this world is an evil planet here to trap you, the best part of you. I think most people have a certain, like, the cynical part of them is like, oh yeah, kind of is, right? Like, there's a certain way that appeal that tells you something you feel like you already kind of intuited to some degree. But like, I think there is a way of looking at the book like, this is the best argument for Gnosticism possible, and like, can you survive that and come out the other side of it somehow not a Gnostic, not thinking the world is evil, right? Yeah. I mean, he's doing, in that case, if that's the case, then McCarthy is doing what some of the greatest writers of all time, Dostoevsky, putting the best arguments into the worst person's mouth. Milton here in Paradise Lost, putting the best arguments in the mouth of Satan. All of that, and then you have to contend with it, right? As a reader.
You know that thing that Coleridge said about in his essay about Othello. And he was talking about Iago, and this is criticism in the great, form of criticism, and the great tradition of not, pointing things out, but not like, he's not like giving it a bad review, giving Paradise a bad review.
Right.
About Iago, that Iago has a motiveless malignancy, which is really great, right? Mm-hmm. There are arguments. Iago makes arguments for why he does what he does. I think we don't quite buy them because what he does seems out of proportion to the various slights. But the judge is possessed of a motiveless malignancy that is blissful. Like, he's ebullient in his evil.
And that's a chilling aspect of it too, right? Yeah.
Whereas Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men is quite bummed out about how evil he has to be.
Yeah.
He's really bummed out.
Really? See, my read, you posted, and this might be we're talking about for a minute if we've got time. You posted a thing about how the judge is sort of macro Chigurh.
In a way,
yeah.
People say, well, it's crazy that McCarthy created the judge and then 20 years later, created Chigurh, which is a shadow of him. I was like, no. He wrote No Country for Old Men as a screenplay in 79 and 80 when he was still trying to find what the locus of Blood Meridian would be, and happen to the judge, right? So I think he worked out the smaller localized evil of Chigurh, that true and living prophet of destruction, and then thought, okay, what is the non-depressed, large, ebullient, and artistic and social, as opposed to antisocial and anti-artistic, like Chigurh.
Right. Well, this is interesting because if you put No Country for Old Men there in the timeline of McCarthy's development as an artist, after Blood Meridian, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think after Blood Meridian, again, No Country for Old Men, put it back in 1980. I don't think after Blood Meridian, and forget the counselor for a second, I don't think after Blood Meridian there are any sustaining villains. Like a villain who is the antagonist throughout the narrative. There are momentary guys who are the characters against, but there aren't an overarching bad guy, right? Very interesting. Because I guess if you've created the judge, I mean, what the hell else are you going to do, right? You're not going to top it. That's really interesting. I've always thought, and I don't even know if I've ever said this, I always thought Chigurh was autistic. Does that make any sense?
I think he's depressed.
Okay. This is a thought I had, because to me, especially in the film, he's sort of like how would you ever appeal to him on an emotional level? Right? Like
the crazy thing about I love the Coen Brothers film. It's a great film, great performance by them. The difference between the novel and the film, I don't think either should be different. But in the novel, after Chigurh gets shot, he goes back, he recuperates, and he starts to change and transform. And so he immediately loads his shotgun with birdshot, and he goes and kills the man who hired Carson Wells.
Right.
And as the guy's choking on his own blood, Chigurh walks up and kneels over him, and he says, "Do you understand what I did? I could have shot you with buckshot, but I didn't want to rain glass on the people below. I need you to understand that." So he moves from psychopathy to sociopathy.
Right.
Recovers, of course, the money. This isn't in the film as well. He immediately takes the money to the man who put the money up in the first place. He returns it to his owner, apologizes that he's light $100,000, but that's Moss's fault, and lets him know, I'm someone you can do business with. I'm reliable.
Yeah, very interesting.
And that concludes, in terms of harking back to other episode, the representation thing. Yeah. The whole conversation, Chigurh looks over at the wall and there's a painting. Yeah. And Chigurh says, "That's nice. Is that the original?" And the man says, "That's not the original, but I own the original. I keep that in a vault." And Chigurh says, "Excellent."
That's awesome. I love it. Well,
that's
Kevin,
it.
I don't have anything else.
Another episode of Art of Darkness. Thank you for listening to this very special dark room. You're already a Patreon subscriber. Hopefully, we've encouraged you to continue supporting the podcast. It really isn't enough just to subscribe and then fade away. We need your ongoing, continued support. We really appreciate it. Every time a new Patreon sub comes along, a living artist has his or her mommy and or daddy issues solved.
It's really amazing to see that happen.
It's an incredible thing. We're like Make-A-Wish, but the artists don't even know they're making a wish. It's really, really fun. And Aaron, thank you so much. You know there's an open door. This was your idea.
Love it. I love it. I love you guys. I love coming on here. I love the conversations that we had in these two, in the dark room and in this Patreon. I think that what we did in the regular episode, I think that's the best piece of content on Blood Meridian that you can listen to at this moment.
Oh man, yeah. Well, that's because of you, buddy. Yeah, you're the man. You're the man.
It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Wait, you're telling me this blood has a meridian?
Hold up.
We didn't even talk about the title.
We didn't. No, that's true.
We can do it later this year at the book club, right
There we
around
go.
Christmas time.
Yeah. A blood meridian Christmas. Yeah.
See
we
the
decorate
shot.
the dead baby tree. We gather around.
Oh,
Damn.
oh boy!
Call their show Art of Darkness. I don't know what I was doing to my psyche.
He was born. He was born in a manger, born to die. Born to die.
Oh.
Oof.